Another rapper and music mogul's in the headlines right now. Dr. Dre, the man behind chart-topping albums and the creator of Beats headphones, is accused of unbearable harassment in a new lawsuit. We're going to break down what Andre Young's one-time marriage counselor is accusing him of. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. All right, what a case to talk about here. So a Southern California psychotherapist filed a lawsuit against Dr. Dre, born Andre Young, accusing the rapper of essentially abuse that made him fear for his life. The counselor is seeking $10 million plus attorney's fees. Will he get that? Will he get more? We'll talk about it. But Dr. Dre, of course, made a name for himself in the 1990s, releasing music with the group NWA, eventually his own solo album, The Chronic. It was the first big project released by Death Row Records, Suge Knight's infamous record label that also signed other huge artists like Tupac and Snoop Dogg. And Dr. Dre is reportedly worth around $800 million. The question now is, could this new lawsuit potentially chip away at that? I want to talk about it. And for that, I want to bring on Randy Kessler, family law attorney, friend of Law&Crime. Haven't seen him in a while, Randy. You've been avoiding me. I don't know what's going on, but good to see you.
No, great to see you. I'm never avoiding you, Jesse. Always a pleasure.
Well, good. Always a pleasure. Good to see you. So let's talk about the lawsuit a little bit. We're talking about Dr. Charles Sophy of Los Angeles, and he alleges that Dr. Dre hired him in 2018 to mediate his divorce from his ex, Nicole Dre Young. Nicole claimed that Dr. Dre had been unfaithful in their marriage. She even claimed that he was verbally abusive. Dre has denied that. And Sophy says that he worked diligently, independently, and fairly to help the couple resolve their disputes, and everything wrapped up with a settlement agreement in 2021. Now, Randy, before we go any further, talk to me about the role that someone like a doctor, a mediator, somebody like Dr. Sophy plays in these kinds of cases, in these mediation divorce settlements.
Okay, so there's so much to unpack here, Jesse, right? Everyone that does this, that's good at it, and what I mean by this is family law, divorce, relationship kind of law. The people that are really good at it, they want to bring closure to their clients, right? They're trying their best to try to bring it to peaceful conclusion without going to court, without litigation, which apparently they did here, right? So there's some element of success in the process. And sometimes it takes a village, right? There are divorce lawyers like me. There are specialists. There are forensic evaluation experts to tell the court who is a better parent. And then there are therapeutic interventionists like this Dr. Sophy. And apparently he was in there trying to mediate, and he sort of blurred the line, I guess, between, therapeutically helping them get through it emotionally and mediating, helping them get through it, maybe even on the financial side, on the parenting time side. And the lines often get blurred in family law because the goal is to bring the family peace in a holistic manner without having someone stand on the witness stand, get cross-examined about every single thing they've done wrong in their life. And so I'm sure the intentions were all good. Where it went awry, we have yet to see.
How could I talk a major lawsuit like this, litigation, and not talk about other major attorneys in this field? Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm, our proud sponsor. Look, if you should get injured, this firm with over 1,000 attorneys may be who you want in your corner. I'll give you an example of what they do. They secured verdicts recently of $12 million in Florida, $6.8 million in New York, and $26 million in Philadelphia. All of these, by the way, considerably higher than the highest insurance offers in these cases. And even if your case isn't worth millions of dollars, why not fight for the compensation you deserve? There's no upfront fee. They only get paid if you get paid. The whole process can be done straight from your smartphone. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar, or you can click the link in the description and pinned in the comments. So Nicole, they settled, Nicole and Dr. Dre. Nicole received reportedly a $100 million payout. She also apparently got to keep jewelry, cash, bank accounts that she had during their marriage. The two split their fleet of cars, with Nicole apparently getting 4, Dr. Dre keeping 6. The rapper also kept all 7 properties that he and Nicole had owned, all in the Southern California area, and the two have 2 children together who are both adults now. Before we go any further, what did you make of that settlement?
It's hard to be an outsider or a Monday morning quarterback. Sounds fine to me, right? And a lot of people might say, well, he's worth $800 million. Why'd you only get $100 million? There's not a lot of law on what do you do when someone's got more than a few $1 million. And so what we found in these high-profile cases, high-dollar cases, is once you get past a certain level, who are we to judge? As long as each side is going to be fine and they're both going to be fine financially, it's a question of How badly did she want out? How badly did he want out? Who was going to push? What did they get by taking that settlement? And I don't mean the money. I mean, what did they get? They got closure. She got to finish the divorce. She's going to be fine financially. I think it was a fine resolution based on the limited information I have.
Right.
Who knows? Was it fair? Was it appropriate? What's fair when you're worth that kind of money,
Well, that might have ended, right? They may have resolved that claim. This is where Dr. Sophy comes in, and this is where we have a whole new case. So Dr. Sophy claims that more than a year after that divorce settlement, long after they stopped communicating, Dr. Dre allegedly started texting him again, and he's accusing him of acting very improperly. The lawsuit says, quote, rather than treating the mediation process as an opportunity for healing, Young decided to take his frustrations about the mediation out on Dr. Sophy, frustrations that manifested themselves in the form of a nearly year-long sustained campaign of late-night texts, threats of intimidation and violence, and homophobic rhetoric. Now, in the complaint, Sophy's legal team provides copies of text messages allegedly sent by Dr. Dre throughout 2023, and people mentioned in those texts had their names redacted for privacy, but you can kind of get a sense of what's going on. In a series of texts allegedly sent in February of 2023, Dre reportedly texted Sophy, redacted, again, we don't know who that person is, redacted, told me something disturbing. You're going to have to pay for that. Then later that day, allegedly sends the doctor a text, you're a B, yes, you're a piece of S. Now, Sophy reportedly texted back the next morning, good morning, I have no idea what you were referring to and would make myself available to discuss anytime. Thank you. To which Dr. Dre allegedly responded, you effed up. Just so you know, I love being underestimated. Now in March, Dre allegedly sent this text, what happened, Doc? I thought you wanted to talk. Cat got your tongue? You're going to have to give me a written apology. If not, I'm moving forward. I'm not playing. Trust me. Then, August 2023, Sophy allegedly gets a text message that said, don't worry, I haven't forgotten about you. And Sophy says in the complaint that because Young had been accused of abuse by women in the past, he, quote, reasonably believed that Young was capable of carrying out his threats and causing physical harm, violence, or death to Dr. Sophy. So, Randy, two sides to every story. We will get to Dr. Dre's in a second. First, these allegations, these text messages, what do you make of it?
Oh my gosh, there's so much here, right? The first thing is they settled the case. This Dr. Sophy didn't tell Dr. Dre or his wife what they were going to do. He was a facilitator. He helped mediate. He might have put pressure. He might have done reality testing and said, hey, if you go to court, this could happen. Apparently, Dr. Dre is not happy with the result, not happy with some aspect of it. And that was bolstered now by some information from some friend or some witness or somebody who got in his ear and said, that mediator was not really on your side or whatever they said. And he's angry. He's angry about something. He's angry either because the settlement didn't go as he wanted, or he was not in charge, or, and we see this a lot, Jesse. We see a lot of people that after the fact, they say, I was treated unfairly. Who is there that I can blame? And in this case, you can't blame the judge. So you're trying to blame the mediator. And the truth is, the mediator doesn't have that much power. People give mediators a lot more power than they think they have. To get a mediated settlement, you've got to agree. You've got to sign off. So it sounds like he's not happy. He's had some second thoughts, and he's trying to pretty much either vindicate himself or avenge whatever he agreed to. The two lawsuits here that we're getting to, right? One is the protective and one is the punitive. The protective order to keep the doctor safe and make sure that Dr. Dre can't be near the therapist, that's one issue. That's a protective issue. The punitive, make Dr. Dre pay $10 million because of the damage, that's a lot harder case. And I guess we're going to, delve into those two as well. But they're two completely different issues. Protective order, judges are always safe, right? I don't know about Dr. Dre being violent. I'm not saying he's violent, but I don't want to be the judge that wakes up in the morning and reads that something bad happened,
Yeah, and I think for Dr. Sophy's point, the idea of that he had a reasonable fear of Dr. Dre, it is true that Dre has been accused of hurting people, women more specifically. A journalist sued him for allegedly attacking her at a party in 1991. He pleaded no contest to charges of assault and battery. He had to pay a fine. He had to create a domestic violence PSA. Former girlfriend claimed that Dre was abusive during the relationship back in the 80s and 90s. Another woman accused him of punching her in the face at a Grammys after party. And back in 2015, before the release of the movie Straight Outta Compton, Dre issued a public apology in the New York Times. They didn't say exactly who he was apologizing to or for, but it said, "I apologize to the women I've hurt. I deeply regret what I did and know that it has forever impacted all of our lives." So first, let me just go there, Randy. You talked about a protective order, which is something that Dr. Sophy is seeking. Could the court say he has a reasonable basis for fear? We're going to put in a protective order. What is a protective order? How long would it last? Let's start there.
Right, so this is law and crime. That's the law part of it. It's not the crime part of it, right? A protective order is basically a civil case saying stay away from everybody. It doesn't mean you go to jail because you did something. It doesn't mean that you have committed a crime. It says there's a reasonable fear and a reasonable basis to give someone some protection. We all hear the term TPO, temporary protective order. I had a friend who named her dog TPO because she restrained the father of the dog from abusing the dog, so she named her dog TPO. But that's what a TPO is, a temporary protective order. It protects, and don't forget, a lot of times these are gotten, like in this case, ex parte, before there are two sides to tell their story. So the initial order goes into place saying, until we can have a full-fledged hearing, I'm going to make sure that the alleged defendant, the alleged perpetrator, can't come near the alleged victim. But there's no finding of, a jury that he did something wrong. There'll be further proceedings, and the judge will have to decide, does this last forever, or is it just temporary until things calm down? So that's just immediate protective thing. And again, the guiding principle is pretty much, does the judge want to wake up in the morning and hear that Dr. Dre did something bad to Dr. Sophy, and the judge had the chance to protect Dr. Sophy? So usually they will grant those out of an abundance of caution. And doesn't mean Dr. Dre's guilty.
Right, no, and I'm glad you clarified that. And it wasn't just threatening or allegedly threatening text messages that Dre had used to allegedly intimidate Dr. Sophy, because according to Sophy, he claims that in February of 2023, after those first text messages, he gets a call from the security guard at the gate to his neighborhood, and the guard said there were a couple people there claiming to be FBI agents who wanted to be shown the way to Sophy's home. And Sophy said he believes that those people were impersonating FBI agents to gain access to his home and send a message that nowhere was safe. The lawsuit states Dr. Sophy lives in constant fear. He wears a bulletproof vest anytime he steps foot outside, is afraid to leave his home, and is constantly looking over his shoulder. The egregiousness of Young's persistent harassing behavior has compelled Dr. Sophy to seek redress and protection. Nobody should have to live in constant fear, but Dr. Sophy does, ironically, for no other reason than he tried to help Young to resolve his own family's conflict. And the lawsuit includes claims of civil harassment and threat of violence based on sexual orientation. He's looking for $10 million, plus, as we talked about, a no-contact order that would require Dr. Dre to stay at least 100 yards away from him. So, Randy, we talked about the protective order. $10 million, is that appropriate, given the allegations in this complaint? Could it be less? Could it be more?
So I think that's a much harder hill to climb. I think Dr. Sophy's first, concern is making sure that he's safe. And the protective order, again, doesn't mean that Dr. Dre committed a crime. So protections are that if Dr. Dre comes near him or his dogs or whoever, he can be arrested just for being near him. So that's the first part. The second part is what we talked about as the punitive. How do you make sure that, he really gets some redress? Does money cure what Dr. Sophy's gone through? Is money the right punishment? I mean, that's the same kind of thing as a car accident. Someone breaks their leg in a car wreck. What's the right amount of money to compensate them? What's the right amount of money to compensate Dr. Sophy for the pain and suffering or the fear? That's an unknown. That's ambiguous. And really, sometimes it depends on the defendant. What's the kind of money that's really going to make an impact on the perpetrator, on the defendant? Because in this case, $10 million may not hurt him so much. That's a tough question. Is $10 million the right amount? But again, a lot of hurdles before you get to that.
Could a jury award more?
They could award more. They could award, like in the Gwyneth Paltrow case, $1 just as a token amount, saying, yes, we find that he did wrong, but we don't think it's worth any money. Or they could award more. That's the hard part, right? For us as lawyers, we're in front of a jury. We got to come up with the right amount, and it's an ambiguous amount. So sometimes we say he's asked for $10 million, but if you think it's worth more, you're welcome to award as much as your conscience tells you. Who knows what a jury would do? But first, they have to get to the point that they think an award of money is warranted, not just because of what Dr. Dre allegedly did, but also the damages, right? What are the damages? Dr. Sophy has to show that this cost him emotionally. And how do you translating emotional, issues like fear into dollars? Boy, that's the holy grail for a lawyer. That's a hard one to do.
And now, Dr. Dre, though, as I mentioned, there are two sides to every story. Dr. Dre is denying this and says that Dr. Sophy has ulterior motives in filing this lawsuit. So Dr. Dre's lawyer, Howard King, released a statement to Rolling Stone about this lawsuit, saying Dr. Dre actually filed a confidential complaint against Dr. Sophy last year, asking the Osteopathic Medical Board of California to investigate Dr. Sophy. Part of that statement reads, that complaint seeks revocation of Dr. Sophy's license to provide mental health counseling to needy patients. In gross violation of all applicable standards of care, Dr. Sophy inserted himself into a contentious divorce while he simultaneously treated not only Mr. and Mrs. Young, but their children. He was terminated when it was revealed that he was encouraging one of their children to take sides against Mr. Young, even encouraging his son to go to the press with false allegations in order to force a financial settlement that he recommended. Dr. Sophy has consistently rebuffed medical board attempts to investigate these claims, but has now filed this desperate suit while the noose of the medical board is tightening. Now, in another text message allegedly sent from Dr. Dre to Sophy, he writes, let me be crystal clear with you. I know a charlatan when I see one. Information is readily available, and I know your reputation and the ethical breaches of conduct that have followed your career, especially during your tenure at DCFS. Fortunately, hearing you defend your choice of clinical interventions to the medical board, particularly as it relates to redacted, will bring me some satisfaction. So, Randy, that is quite the counter argument there. What do you think?
I couldn't have put it better myself. Quite the counter argument. You said at the beginning there are two sides to every story, and we all know that that cliche. There are two sides. That is a great fact for Dr. Dre in a lawsuit, right? To be able to say, you know, what's the motive? And again, a lot of times in crimes and cases, we don't need to know about motive, but everyone wants to know, why would the doctor do this if he's not afraid? If he's afraid, he's suing. Why else would he do it? This answers that question. This is his whole life. This is his career. This is his reputation. And he's trying to take on, you know, maybe it's like that old saying, the best defense is good offense. So instead of defending my reputation in front of the board, I'm going to go on the offense and prove that the person accusing me is just off the deep end. It's exactly what you would need if you were Dr. Dre's lawyer. You need a fact like that. Thank goodness he's got that. Makes the case a lot tougher for Dr. Sophy.
You mentioned a fact like that. So the Medical Board of California hasn't, as far as I can tell at the time of this recording, hasn't released a statement yet. If they do, I imagine they have to be very careful about how they proceed, because if they confirm anything that Dr. Dre said, they are investigating the doctor, you know, he hasn't been receptive, whatever it might be, that could be very problematic for Dr. Sophy's lawsuit, right? So, I mean, what do you imagine? Do you think the medical board will release a statement? And I mean, I'd be very curious what that statement is.
I think they might, but we got to remember, these are two completely separate issues. Dr. Sophy is defending himself in front of that board, and who knows what they're going to say. I have a sense maybe they're going to say, look, we don't get into that, or we can't vindicate that, or there was a lot of stuff that we don't know. I don't think they're going to do too much with that, but I don't think it's going to affect the $10 million lawsuit. I mean, the $10 million lawsuit against Dr. Dre's now got an explanation. Yeah, I'm being sued because I raised this claim. Whether Dr. Dre wins in front of the board or not, it gives Dr. Sophy a motive to go after Dr. Dre. So he's going to use it to defend. Dr. Dre is going to use that board issue in the $10 million lawsuit. Whether the board vindicates Dr. Dre or Dr. Sophy is irrelevant in the other case. But, you know, the standards are pretty high. It's pretty hard to get a person disbarred or decertified, whatever it is, based on one situation. But it's certainly causing problems for Dr. Sophy. And the real big issue here is Dr. Dre is better funded than Dr. Sophy, presumably. I don't know how much money Dr. Sophy has, but it sounds like Dr. Dre has resources. He can employ lawyers, he can employ investigators, he can employ people to put on the very best case and give himself the best chance of winning in both courtrooms, in both environments, in front of the board and in front of the $10 million lawsuit jury.
Randy Kessler, we will see where this goes. Thank you so much for coming on. Good seeing you again.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you, Jesse.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.